Hi, everyone. My name is Sangeeta Prabhakaran. I am the founder and CEO of STEM for Scouts, which is a nonprofit program partnered with Everybody Code Now, teaching Girl Scouts how to code. So, what I do is I help Girl Scouts earn their Coding for Good and digital leadership badges through previously in person and now virtual workshops where they complete a coding project, learn about some awesome female leaders in computer science, and overall leave feeling a little bit more confident, either programming in Scratch, which is block-based programming, or JavaScript if they are a little bit older. So in this tutorial, I'm just going to take y'all through some of our asynchronous materials that we offer for Girl Scouts. What we do is we offer a completely asynchronous experience via Google Classroom, where they can go through the steps of earning their badges that we've broken down into 4 major steps. And they're just going to follow along with one of our video tutorials that are linked on our Google Classroom, along with some additional material. So the Girl Scout would, using our Google Classroom, already have her template set up. She makes her way to step 3, opens up our video tutorial, and this is just kind of what it would look like. So welcome to earning your very first Coding for Good badge. Today, we're going to be talking about doing some basic JavaScript in order to create a meme. So you can see here in Woofjs, this is a really great website for you to learn how to code and create games and build animations, all without having to really download anything to your computer. Woofjs is 100% free to use, so I really encourage y'all to create an account on the website so that way you can save your code and then you can continue exploring after the tutorial as well. And so today what we're going to do is we are going to essentially replicate this project, but you're going to be able to build a meme of your own. So you see here, I have my Woofjs dog. I'm going to click on my dog and you can see it switches to a little bit more of a silly picture. And I added my meme line that says when my code throws an error, maybe how my face looks. And I have some peppermints falling. So before we get started and diving into the actual code, what exactly is programming? Well, programming is simply just telling a computer what to do. We're just giving the computer some instructions. Now, there's a few ways to do that because computers interpret information differently from how humans do. So the way humans use English to communicate, computers use code to communicate. So what I have to do is I have to translate my thoughts that are in English into possibly JavaScript or Scratch, which is a block-based programming language, which are languages that the computer can understand instead. So go ahead and open up your template. You might see kind of the start to our project. And the first thing I want you to pay attention to is we have all of these comments. Now, comments are essentially this like goldish, brownish text. And you can see, and we can read it perfectly fine. It's just English, nothing fancy there. And these are notes that we've placed for y'all throughout your template to help guide you. So I'm going to be making references to these comments or these notes throughout the code, and they're just there to help guide you and follow along with me as I write the program. As well as the other thing you're going to see me referencing are these numbers off to the side, my line numbers where my code is. Again, it's just a number labeling the line that my code is on. And you don't worry if your line numbers change a little bit from what mine are. They can change easily just from hitting enter once. So as long as your number is pretty close to the line number that my code is on, don't stress too much. And the third thing that I want to preface with is in JavaScript programming, you have to pay really close attention to curly braces and parentheses. It's how we build sections in our code. And when there's issues with the curly braces and parentheses, the computer can get confused as to which section of code we're working in. And sometimes when there's inconsistent overlap with that, we can cause errors in our code, which means the computer doesn't understand the instructions that we've given it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started and build our meme. So some of this we've written for y'all. We've loaded in our Candyland background here. So that's already set up for you. And you can see my button is also loaded in, which just defaults to getting my dog. We've also written some code so that when you click on the dog, it'll disappear. Now, in order to run your code, which means tell the computer to actually follow the instructions that we've given it, you can click on this reload button here at the top. Kind of looks like an arrow morphed into a circle. So you're going to click on that reload button and you can see everything pops up as normal. So anytime you want to restart your code or run it from the beginning, you're going to select this reload button along your blue bar. All right, so button equals new image. All this is we're creating a new image object in JavaScript which is basically loading in a default image that WoofJS already has stored. This is actually the WoofJS mascot. And an object is basically just like a collection of information that is all stored in one place. And we're storing that under a variable named button. Now, some of y'all maybe in math class have used variables like X and Y to represent numbers, and it works pretty much the same in JavaScript. The idea here is I am creating a variable called button. So I'm creating a label that's storing some information about an image that I seek to display. So that's all that's going on. One piece that we're going to add here on line 5 is we are going to type in the keyword var right in front. So you can see button changes. It has blue text now. So on line 5, right before the word button, you're going to type in var with me. And var is short for variable, and it's a key word that JavaScript really needs in order to recognize that I'm actually trying to create a variable. So in order to tell the computer that I want to create a variable button and help it understand that, we need to type in the keyword. All right, so we're going to go ahead and scroll down. Feel free to pause the video if you need to as you're filling in the sections. And let's look at some of these comments. So we're going to create some text to let the player know that they need to click the button. So I want some black text appearing above my dog. We've already set up a text object for you. And so we've named that and stored it in a variable called a button text. And so we're going to be working between these parentheses and curly braces for a text object. And so again, an object, it's just a collection of information. So we have to tell our text, or we have to give our text a few characteristics. We have to tell it what text it actually needs to display, maybe the size of the font, maybe the color of the font, and also the location of the text. Where do we actually want to see those words appearing? So the very first characteristic that we've given is our text attribute. And so we're going to work between these quotations on line 11. And I'm simply just between the quotations, I'm going to set the actual text that I want to display. So I'm going to say click the dog, again, between the quotations, that's super important, to view your meme. So you can see, I do have some text on my screen, but it's not exactly appearing where I want it to. And that's okay, because I'm going to let y'all in on a secret. Computers are lazy, which means they're never going to do anything that we don't tell them to do. So if I don't tell my text what the XY coordinates are, like what the actual location should be for it on the screen, if I don't tell it to change its size, it's not going to. It's just going to default to being whatever its default size is, which is pretty small. And it's going to default to being in the center of the screen, which in this case isn't really what we're looking for. So you can see at the end of line 11, I have a comma here, which is there to separate each of the characteristics that we place. So keep a close eye out for those commas at the end of your lines, just between this section. And on line 13, I am going to set the X and Y coordinates for my text. So I'm going to say X, lowercase, colon. And then I'm going to say, well, I still want the X, I still want it to be centered along the horizontal axis. So I'm just going to say 0 for the X. And then that's another characteristic I've added. So I'm going to finish that line with a comma. And then to make a new line right underneath, I'm going to hit return or enter. And then I'm going to select Y, colon, still lowercase. And I'm going to estimate, maybe I just want to increase the height a little. Let's see what 50 looks like. And don't forget that comma at the end. So you can see the height increased a good amount. But the cool thing about WoofJS is they have this really cool feature called mouse X and mouse Y, which basically tells you the XY location of your mouse on the actual screen. So I can actually use my mouse to estimate the X's and Y's. I don't really have to guess too much. Again, I know that I still want X to be 0, but I really want the height to be around here where my mouse is. So we're going to say, okay, that means that mouse Y right now is listed as 89 at the top. So we're going to change my Y up here from 50 to 89. You can see my code right now is set to auto run in WoofJS. The reason for that is if I click here in tools, the auto run box is checked. This is pretty standard for WoofJS, but if for any reason you don't see that, you can just check the box. But that's just going to make sure that your code is going to automatically run anytime you make a change. But you're not going to see that if that box isn't checked with the blue check mark. Anytime if you still don't see it auto running for any reason, no worries. Anytime you make a change, go ahead and just let that reload, does the same thing. All right, so hopefully you've changed your X and Y and you see your text in an area above the dog that you like. So you can adjust the height to however much you prefer. If you want it a little higher, you can keep changing that number. Again, don't forget those commas after each of your characteristics. We call those attributes. And the last thing I'm going to do, this is on line 16 for me, is I am going to change the size of the text to be bigger on the line below. So again, use these comments to help guide you along through your code. So it's most important that you're working on the lines underneath the comment. So focus mostly on those rather than the line numbers too much. Anyway, so to set the size, I'm just going to say size. And I'm going to say, let's try 25. And you can see my text is much bigger. So now it says, again, click the dog to view your meme. Right now, again, computers are lazy, so they're not going to do what we don't tell them to do. So because I haven't told my dog to actually change its image yet, I'm not going to see it. But everything does disappear as soon as I click on it, which is good for now. That code is already preloaded in there for us. A few things to note if you're having errors. Make sure that your attributes are all between your opening, or this is what we call our opening parenthesis and curly brace. This fun like squiggly line is what's called a curly brace. This curved line is a parenthesis. And then the matching ones will close up. So you can see I have one that's opening up to the right, and then it's matching curly braces opening up to the left. Same thing with the parentheses. So make sure all the attributes that you just added are between the curly braces for that section, so that JavaScript knows I'm only trying to modify button text and not any of the other stuff on my screen. All right, so at this point, we're going to take a little break from our meme, and we're going to add a little to our animation for the candy shower. So we need to load in our 3 pictures of candies onto Woof.js. And so we're just going to basically, these are called sprites. And so sprites are simply just pictures that we can give some code to tell them to do something a little more interesting. So in this case, we want to give the candy pictures some instructions to first be hidden, and then once we select our dog, then they'll be receiving some instructions to start at the top of the screen and fall down. So I'm going to go to documentation. So I'm just going to click on the purple bar, documentation. We're going to select sprites and backgrounds, which is that gray box. And from there, you're going to select image. And they have a bunch of fun images in here. So we're just going to scroll until we find our candies. They have a lot of stuff in here, so I might need to scroll for a minute. All right, so I have some candy in here. I found a candy bowl. And then we also have our pink candy, and then they also should have like a peppermint. They have a lollipop. They have a bunch of stuff in here. It doesn't really matter too much which candies you pick. So go ahead and pick out whichever sprites you really like. We want 3 of them. So I'm going to select, again, my candies. So we're going to say, all you have to do is you can just hit copy for mint. And the reason it's okay if you copy and paste this code is just because the URL is very specific for each image. And so that's what's actually loading in the picture into Woof.js. So if this is even off by 1 character, it could give you some issues. So depending on what you're comfortable with, you can select this copy button. And then on line 20, you can paste. You can right click and you can select paste. You can see a peppermint will appear on my screen. And something that's also cool about Woof.js is as long as you're careful about where your cursor is, like for example, this cursor is on line 26, I can actually click and drag the lollipop image and I can place it on line 26. And you can also click and drag your candy code, which I think is cool. Take note, all we're doing is we're creating an image object. This time it's a collection of information about where the picture is coming from, which is the URL, and the width and height for the picture as well. So that's been preloaded for us. And then I'm going to select a third. So I'm just going to select candy. You can click and drag the image, or you can copy and paste the code, all under this section that says create 3 images for candies. And notice I am leaving a line of space between each of my image objects, like for my candies. That's just to make sure I don't get any accidental overlap between the curly braces and parentheses for each section. All right, so again, it's okay if you chose different pictures from me. The only piece of information that you want to note if you do have different pictures from me is whatever variable name we have going on here. So I have var mint, lollipop, and candy. So in my code, I'm going to be referencing mint, lollipop, and candy when I want to make the images that are stored in those variables do fun things. Again, just a reminder, variables are just a way for us to store information. In this case, I've stored the information of my mint, the information of my lollipop, and the information of my candy in those three variables. So if you have different variable names, you want to reference whatever you have on your screen. So we're going to work underneath the comment that says hide the candies at the start of the game on the 3 lines below. So around the area I'm in is about line 40. It's okay if your numbers are a little different. So in order to tell these candies to hide at the very beginning, because I don't want to see them yet, I'm going to reference their variable name. So the first one is mint. So I'm just going to say mint dot hide, and then add some parentheses by hitting Shift 9. And you can see my mint disappeared from my screen. Now what I just did here was I called a method. Now methods are basically like these sets of pre-written instructions, or basically like little packages of code. And I am simply just referencing my mint object or my image, and I'm applying the instructions that are stored inside of hide to my mint. So in a way, it's just like giving it a command. So all I'm doing is I'm giving my mint the hide command. Someone in WooFJS already did the hard work of explicitly writing out exactly what looks like the instructions for the hide command, and I can just use that command now. So we're going to get into a minute how we can write a function, which is us writing those pre-written instructions for a different purpose, for different commands. So anyway, let's finish hiding our lollipop and our candy. So I'm going to say lollipop dot hide. You can see the lollipop disappears, and then same thing for my candy. I'm going to say candy dot hide, open closing parenthesis, and you can see if you wrote your code correctly, you should see all 3 of your images disappear. Again, notice how I'm working underneath the comment that says hide the candies at the start of the game. And again, you can just see my code auto running. So my code is running every time I'm making a change. If for some reason it's not auto running, no worries. Just again, you can hit that restart button right here at the top. It'll do the same thing for you. It's just not automatic. All right, let's keep scrolling down, friends. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to write a function. Functions and methods are very, very similar. If you're more interested in exactly knowing the difference between functions and methods, that's a fun Google rabbit hole to go down, but I'm not going to go down that today. But just know they're very similar, but there is a reason they do have different names. So in this case, we are going to create a function called candy shower. And so basically what we're doing is we're writing a set of instructions to teach each of our individual candies how to start at the top of our screen, fall down, and once they reach that bottom edge, to restart at the top at a different spot and fall down once again, and continue repeating that behavior over and over and over again. So I don't want to have to first teach my lollipop how to do a candy shower, and then teach my mint, and then teach my candy, because that's repeating a lot of the same code. The only thing that's different amongst those 3 actions is it's just a different candy falling each time. So instead, this is one of the benefits of functions. I say, I'm going to write a set of instructions that tells any candy how to start at the top of the screen and fall down to the bottom edge. And then I'm just going to apply that set of instructions to any sprite or any candy image that I have, and tell each of those candy objects to follow those instructions. So now I only have to write my set of instructions one time, and then I can apply those instructions to any other image, and it saves me a lot of time. So we're going to work between our curly braces for candy shower, and you're going to work underneath the comment that says show the candy. So at this point inside of candy shower, again, it's pre-written set of instructions. So I'm basically like writing up this little package of code, but I'm not implementing it yet. I'm not actually running the code yet. So I'm saying eventually when it's time for the candy to fall, I want it to show up. So I'm going to say, I need to basically know what candy actually needs to show up. And so this is where we're going to build something called a parameter, or an argument really. And we're going to work between between our parentheses after candy shower, and we're going to say candy name. Make sure to always follow the same casing that I'm using. And so what this is doing is basically like any other function, candy shower is going to take in an input. It's going to say, okay, well, if you want me to know how to tell any candy to start at the top of my screen and fall down to the bottom, you need to give me that candy as an input. So we're saying, well, I have lots of other candies that are coming into candy shower. So I'm going to give a more general name, treat this as like a variable. So I'm going to say, all right, whatever candy that's coming into candy shower is going to be given all of these instructions inside of my candy shower function. And then the output is actually seeing that candy fall from the top of the screen. So it's always really important to pick more general name so that you can plug in other images into candy shower when you're ready to actually run that code. Again, we're kind of tackling a concept that definitely takes a little practice. So don't feel like you have to have it down 100% right now. Just giving you a taste of lots of different parts about coding. So again, bottom line, candy shower is a function. Functions give us inputs and outputs. Candy name is our input. So we're saying, give me any candy. My candy is going to be treated given the instructions for how to start at the top, fall to the bottom, and our output is actually seeing that happen on the screen. All right, so underneath show the candy, I'm going to say candy name dot show. So very similar to what we just did with hide. And then we have some code here that's telling our candy name to always start at the top of our screen above the edge that it looks like it's falling down. So don't need to change anything there. And then underneath line 52, it says set a random X value on the line below. So we just set the Y value for candy name. The Y has to do with the height. And now I want to pick a random X. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to reference the X of my candy. So I'm going to say candy name dot X. And I'm going to say equals, and I'm going to call the random X function, which is another pre-written set of instructions. This time I'm implementing those instructions. And so inside of the random X function, it's going to do exactly what it does. It's going to pick a random X value along the top of the screen. And the cool thing about WoofJS is this will actually modify based on my screen size. So for example, if I closed out my code for a second, my X values get much bigger. But the cool thing about the random X function is it will adjust. So you're not going to see my candies only be within a certain set of boundaries that were based on the screen size when I was coding before, but you'll see them come all the way over to this right and left edge as well. So those numbers will adjust, which is cool. Now underneath, we have something called a forever loop. Now forever loops are basically a way for us to repeat code for, in this case, a candy over and over and over again. You see, again, I don't want my candies to ever stop falling from the top of the screen and restarting there. So I say, let me teach it how to fall one time. And then I'm going to place that code inside of a forever loop. And the forever loop is going to do the job for me of repeating it over and over again. So underneath forever, it says decrease the Y position on the line below. So we're going to say, okay, candy starting at the top. Let's start to decrease that number. So we're going to say candy name dot Y. And then I want to make sure that it keeps getting smaller and smaller. So the way we do that in JavaScript is I'm just going to say minus equals, and I want my candies to fall like kind of fast. So I'm just going to say minus equals 2. And you can add a semicolon at the end. So all we're doing here is by decreasing the Y value, you're decreasing its like height along the top of the screen, and it's going to keep falling when we actually tell our function to run. So after we've done candy name.y minus equals 2, we are going to say, well, I need to have my candy ask a question. I need it to ask the question, well, it needs to check when it's actually getting to the bottom of the screen. You see, this is what we call a conditional statement. And it's basically a way for my candy to say, there's going to be times where I'm at the bottom edge of my screen, but not always, but sometimes. So I'm going to check if I am at the bottom edge of my screen. Well, then what do I need to do? Well, then I need to go back up to the top of my screen and restart my Y height. So this is what we call an if-then statement. It's a type of conditional statement. So it's basically just saying, if a certain scenario occurs, then I'm going to run some code as a result, which is the same thing as saying, if that certain scenario does not occur, then I'm not going to run this certain code as a result. So the if, like the scenario that we're checking for, is going to be between these curly braces. Right now, we've just written the word true there for you. You can delete that for now. And between our curly braces, we are going to insert our scenario. Well, the way I can check if my candy went past the bottom edge is I can check if the Y value is lower than a variable that's called min Y or minimum Y. So it's basically saying WIF.js is a variable with the Y value for whatever the bottom edge of your screen is, and everybody has different screen sizes. So everyone typically has slightly varying like minimum Y values. So I'm going to say, well, if candy name dot Y, and then I'm going to reference the min Y variable, because again, that variable automatically adjusts based on screen size. And I'm going to say, well, if it's less than or equal to min Y, that helps me check for my scenario of if my candy goes past the bottom edge. And so you can see between the curly braces of my if statement, that's where the then portion goes. So my candy goes, okay, well, I went off the screen. What do you want me to do about it? I say, okay, I want you to start back at the top. And once again, what we're going to fill in is also say, you're starting at the top, your height is very high again, but your X needs to change so that you're not always falling from the same spot along the top. So I'm going to say candy name dot X. And once again, equals, because I'm changing the X characteristic of candy name, random X, opening, closing parenthesis. Again, be really mindful of capitalization. You want to make sure you're using the same casing that I am so that your code works. All right, so that was kind of a lot, but that is it for a candy shower function. So I would say from here, the hard part's pretty much over. So we're going to continue scrolling down, and we're going to start seeing all of our pieces kind of come together. Like we put our button on our screen, we put our text on our screen. Now it's a matter of saying, okay, well, when I actually click on my button, let's have it change its picture, and let's actually see our candy fall, and let's also see our text change, right? So we're going to scroll down, and you can see I have a function here called button.onMouseDown. So this is like an event kind of, and it's my button, my dog, is anticipating the user to click on it. So that is an event because it's basically waiting for an action from the human, and that triggers whatever code that we place between these curly braces. So whereas all our other code kind of auto runs because it's not inside of an event, this code will only run if it's triggered by the event of me clicking on my dog. So the first thing I want to do is let's change the picture of my dog. So we've loaded in a few image addresses for you. So they're just kind of like some memes, and you can see like you can copy and paste the image. And if we opened up a new tab, like we have some funny pictures here for you. And so I think I'm going to go with Walter the Bull Terrier today. Hopefully y'all are familiar with Walter, like best meme ever. So you can see if you copy and paste that image address, you'll see the picture load up. So you can copy whatever image you like. Again, the way you can copy just the address, by the way, not like the text that's labeled with it, and be careful to like not include the hyphen or anything, is you can highlight over starting at the HTTPS all the way to the end. And then you can right click and select copy. And then you're going to scroll down, and we're going to find this line here that says pick a meme. And right in between where it says button.set image URL, right between those single quotes, you're going to paste. So you can right click and select paste. And so now what happens, let's see. So I can try to click on my dog and it changes to a huge Walter the Bull Terrier. So let's go ahead and change the size of Walter, because Walter's great, but I need to see my text too. So we're going to make our meme a little smaller. So again, I'm going to reference my button variable. So all I've done is I've swapped out the previous image address that was our mascot, our other dog. And I'm going to say, well, now I need to adjust the height. So I'm going to say button dot width, and I'm going to set it probably to about 100. So I'm changing a characteristic, and then I'm going to say button dot height equals 100 because I still want it to be a square. So I'm changing the width and the height. I click on my dog. Okay, so it's an estimation. My picture's a little smaller than I would like it, so you can experiment a little. Let's try like 200 for the width. And I would probably say like 200 for our height. It's all right. I might even go as far as say 250. I like Walter to be pretty big. I think that's pretty good. All right, so you can see once again, I reloaded my code just by hitting reload up here. I clicked on my dog and Walter appears. All we did was we set the image URL. You can pick any of these 4 image addresses that you like. And we changed our size by referencing button. Also, a quick note to make, if you're noticing you're getting like errors, for example, an error can just come from like missing syntax or something. Usually it means that WooFJS will start highlighting it in red, and then you might see your code disappear for a second. A few reasons for that could also be like a spelling error, or you can see like just me removing like one important character there cause the computer to not understand the code. So if you're noticing any of that, you can either reference our completed project here that we have on Google Classroom for you, and you can see all the completed code is in here. And you can, compare your code with our completed code, or you can also take a look here at what I've got and just rewind the video. But really keep your eye out for all the little things. Check capitalization, check whether you accidentally hit enter and move something to the following line that can possibly cause issues. Check for little characters that you might be missing, casing, all of that stuff. All right, so hopefully your code is working. So we're gonna scroll down to finish it, last 3 parts. And now I'm gonna actually add my meme line. So again, feel free to be creative, think about what kind of meme line you want. I'm gonna use the one from my sample. And so I'm gonna replace button text that previously was giving me some instructions, and I'm gonna replace it with my text between quotations that says, when my code throws an error. So now when I click on my dog, so you might notice that our code here has told our button our button text to change. So you can see now when my code throws an error shows up. I just want to again reposition my button text, but this time I want it to be based on the Y value of my button image. So all we're going to do is you can kind of just estimate. So I'm going to replace 0, and I'm going to say, let's try like plus 100. So now when I click, my text is a good bit higher. So again, this is just an easy way to tell your text to position itself based on the location of another image so that they always stay like spaced apart the same. I'm going to make it increase a little more. So I'm saying plus 150. So I click on my dog, and I'm happy with where that text is. All right, and our last piece is we are going to tell our candies to fall. So again, we pre-wrote the instructions that can take in one candy and tell it to start at the top and fall to the bottom. So now we're just going to apply each of those instructions, apply each of those commands to each of our candies. So in my case, it's mint, lollipop, and candy. So I'm going to first give my function name. So I'm going to say candy shower, add some parentheses. And before where I said candy name, now I'm going to actually insert the actual candy name. So I'm going to start with mint, and I'm going to twice more candy shower, this time for lollipop, and then one more time for candy. So this time I've called the same set of instructions 3 times, each time with a different candy, all above this final set of closing curly braces and parentheses. And now I click on my image, and you can see our candies fall. Let's wait for them to get down to the bottom. And then you'll see them restart again at the top. And they're just going to keep going there until, for eternity, because it isn't a forever loop. So again, if you see your image changing, if you see your text changing, and if you see Your candy's falling on your screen. Congratulations, you have just created your very own meme. You should be so proud of yourself because it's a little more than a meme. It's got an animation too with it. And with that, cadets, you have also earned your very first Coding for Good badge. So congratulations. Feel free to check out our other Google Classrooms as well, or live workshops on Google Meet if you're interested in earning your second and third Coding for Good badges, which are your digital game design and your app development. And you can continue trying out some JavaScript and building out some games and apps on WoofJS. And again, I really encourage you to create an account on WoofJS so that you can save your project, so that you can continue exploring. The cool thing about WoofJS as well, in their documentation, they have a lot of really great sample code. So you can click on looks and you can see, if you're familiar with Scratch, you might see some old Scratch blocks, and they have all this great example code here. So you can kind of just tinker around and play with it, and just see what you can get your sprites to do. So they have a lot of stuff with motion, and you can kind of go through, and again, just see what you can get your sprites to do. So with that, happy coding, friends, and congratulations once again on earning your Coding for Good badge. So with that, hopefully that was a fun little walkthrough. For any of y'all that are interested in building asynchronous materials for the girls that you may be teaching, a few things I want to touch on is when I first started doing virtual workshops, especially, and I started to have a little bit more of like a national reach with Girl Scouts, it makes it apparent that obviously everybody's skill levels just in terms of digital literacy are really different, which is why in your video tutorials, I really encourage you to really touch on all the pieces that you might feel are obvious. Like, go through a little bit, just like how to copy and paste, like talk that part out. Or even just how to copy image addresses versus link addresses. Sometimes people don't see the difference between those. I've even have middle schoolers that I teach that really aren't very strong on exactly what the difference between like quotations or parentheses or curly braces are. So just define as much as you can along the way, obviously without it becoming too much of a hassle. Because again, even the simplest like jargon for us might still feel a little intimidating or new for a beginner. So just keep that in mind when you're building your tutorials. I love platforms like WoofJS and Scratch because it's a great way for them to explore while still be able to create games and having some sort of visual aspect. You want to make sure that your games are fun and engaging, as well as Scratch and WoofJS are great platforms for girls to continue exploring on even after your sessions. So that's why I really love those platforms. And the third thing I want to say is if you're planning on building any sort of like asynchronous material the way we have with our Google Classrooms, make sure that you keep it being user-friendly as like the very first thing in mind, especially because a lot of your students, maybe they have a parent that's helping them through it that isn't super familiar with technology. So keep the instructions there. I like to keep things just step by step, few simple steps to make things super easy to just kind of navigate through, because in case they haven't used platforms like Google Classroom before. So yeah, keeping it user-friendly in mind just to make sure that obviously your participant has a stress-free experience and they're more focused on creating the code and building the fun project rather than trying to work out the logistics of everything. So hope this was helpful. Feel free to always reach out to me at sanjitha@stem4scouts.org if you ever have any questions. I'm always happy to help y'all out. And good luck with the rest of your endeavors. Great job on all the stuff that y'all are doing. All right, thank you so much.